There's a D&D meme based on truth, and that is that the human fighter is the most popular class and race combination in the game. It is a meme because the combination is so incredibly boring and uninventive on the one hand, but also so absolutely common on the other. The reasons for this would require an entire video, which is not this video's purpose or scope. But suffice to say that if you grasp that humans are familiar and fighters are straightforward, then you will have understood a big part of the reasoning behind it. This is relevant because today we are talking about the race and to a lesser extent the class you will be picking in terms of its reactivity in the world, as well as the asymmetries that exist both in terms of racial abilities and the social environment, i.e. the aforementioned reactivity with NPCs. Let us begin with the technical. Both a certain class and a certain race will do different things differently well, but inevitably, there will be a hierarchy that emerges from the many choices available. A cleric, for example, is a much better support class than is a rogue, and a rogue is a much better single-target striker than a cleric is, as a rule. But classes as such are not necessarily in the same sort of neck-and-neck competition that race choice arguably leads to, as classes have largely preordained roles, which can occasionally be swapped out and tweaked, but as just mentioned, for the most part, people play rogues for single-target damage and clerics for support, although not exclusively. You get my point. Race is important because from a technical standpoint, you choose a race because it brings benefits to the class you wish to play. And the new attribute allocation system does not change this entirely, because certain racials are still better for certain classes than others. For example, half-orcs are incredibly stacked in terms of their racials for a melee class. As a half-orc, you gain dark vision, 30-foot movement speed, free intimidation proficiency, savage attack, and relentless endurance, all of which just scream warrior. And this means that half-orcs are objectively better martials than gnomes are. There's simply no way around it. And more broadly, some races just offer more mechanical bonuses in their total package than others do, and are thus objectively better from a mechanical perspective. Take the Wood Elf, for example. You gain dark vision, elven weapon proficiency, resistance to charm and immunity to sleep, free stealth proficiency, fleet of foot, which gives you 35-foot movement speed, and free perception. Compare the Wood Elf then to a forest gnome, which gets dark vision, reduced movement speed, speak with animals is a free bonus spell, and gnome cunning. Looking at this, the Wood Elf wins, the forest gnome loses, with the exception of gnome cunning. There isn't anything truly amazing going on with him. Speaking, of course, here from a strictly mechanical perspective. And this exists in tension at times with the role-playing aspect of it all, which is not to say that everyone is conflicted on this issue. There are, after all, exceptions, but it isn't uncommon to want great racials and a great role-playing experience. And if you're lucky enough to want to role-play, say, a drow, well, in that case, you've won the Wombo Combo lottery. But with many other races, that won't always necessarily be true. I'm talking about this to establish the premise that there can be a conflict of interest when it comes to picking your race. At the moment, humans are a bottom-tier race, which could change depending on what they look like in terms of racials in the final release of the game, but the ultimate point to be made here is that racials in the world of Dungeons & Dragons are not meant to be symmetrical, as some races really do have significantly better racials for some things than others, and that's okay, provided you're willing to pay a certain price. People are going to vary on this matter, as I've already stated, but in a game such as Baldur's Gate 3, it's not just about choosing the mechanical aspect for most people. Indeed, most people have preferences in terms of the role-playing story aspect as well. And this is really where the discussion gets particularly interesting in the context of the game. Sven Vinke has stated that in similar fashion to mechanical differences, the world, i.e. the NPCs, will respond differently to you depending on what race you play, meaning that there will be asymmetrical racial reactivity. Imagine for a moment going out there in the world of Faerun and being treated as exceptional for being a human? Well, in reality, you wouldn't be, because humans are the most populous race in Faerun, which is why humans will probably have very minimal levels of reactivity, unless perhaps they are interacting with Underdark races in the Underdark. Conversely, as I've already mentioned, Drow are going to have huge levels of reactivity in the game, something confirmed by Sven, and something you can actually personally bear witness to even in early access. When you approach the Goblin Village and you happen to be a drow, you will have a drow dialogue option to put the goblins that threaten you in their place that requires no skill check whatsoever, and it makes sense. The goblins are nominally being led by a drow, and the drow seemingly play an important role in the hierarchy of the Absolute. Beyond that, being a drow on the surface is not at all commonplace, lest you've been misled by Dritstoerden memes and novels. So there will be a fair number of people who will comment on that. And for the record, playing a drow combines great mechanical racials with great reactivity, and thus I foresee many players choosing drow for their first run, and beyond for this very reason. You get to be an edgelord, and do it with mechanical style, as it were. Another race that will have a good amount of reactivity is the Dwergar, or Grey Dwarves. Sven himself stated that they will have 200 lines of reactive dialogue based on their race, and depending on how the race is implemented in the game, their racials will either be very good to good, and with that you can buck the trend of playing humans or elves or drow for that matter, which is why I am currently heavily leaning towards Dwergar for my race for my first Tav run, as I'm trying to walk the balance of good racials and good reactivity, but also play a race that is less popular than the others. Other races that are sure to get a lot of reactivity will obviously be Dragonborn, whom you can tell Larian is especially proud of, as I imagine many people in the game, both friend and foe, in a variety of situations. Half-orcs I could also see getting a fair bit of reactivity as well, as will tieflings, almost certainly. Deep gnomes, hailing from the Underdark, might get some above-average reactivity, one could hope, and the Githyanki will receive a lot of interesting reactivity, especially when dealing with other Githyanki, relating to the unusual presence of this race in the game, and this has been officially confirmed by Sven. Races that will probably not get that much reactivity, apart from the already mentioned humans, are all the standard elves, i.e. wood and high elves, standard gnomes, i.e. rock and forest gnomes, standard dwarves, i.e. gold and shield dwarves, halflings, and finally, the ever-boring half-elves. You might ask yourself why, but none of these races are especially rare on the surface of Faerun, and therefore are unlikely to cause a stir or surprise people, and so they will have less reactivity. Ultimately, this is about preference and choice. I'm not telling you to play or do anything in this game, but if you are looking for a truly reactive experience as it pertains to race, I offer you my speculative tier list of reactivity, where reactivity is defined both in terms of frequency of dialogue reactions, but also consequences related to race, which is as follows. Number 1 are the Drow. Number 2 are the Dragonborn. Number 3 are the Githyanki. Number 4 are the Dwergar. Number 5 are the Half-Orcs. Number 6 are the Deep Gnomes. Number 7 are the Tieflings. Number 8 are the Other Gnomes. Number 9 are the Halflings. Number 10 are the Other Dwarves. Number 11 are the Other Elves. Number 12 are the Half-Elves. And number 13 are the Humans. Now this speculative list is only meant to cover the social, i.e. dialogue aspects of the game, even though I did talk a little bit about mechanical aspects. But perhaps you too as a player are considering how to best combine mechanical benefits with reactive elements, and if so, consider choosing a combination of race and class that will yield you both the best in terms of mechanics as well as reactivity, because all of this will ultimately be asymmetrical between the races you choose. At the end of the day, I know that everyone is just going to be a drow edgelord. But before I go, I'd like to invite you to my Discord server, where you can discuss Baldur's Gate 3 with like-minded people, as well as other RPGs. And as always, thank you for tuning in. And if you like my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out with the channel growth. And if you can hit the bell icon to be notified of my videos, it would be much appreciated. And I will check you out next time. Take care.